I still remember the day it all began, though I wish I could forget it. The day the universe woke up and realized that humanity was no longer just a fledgling species on a pale blue dot. Until that moment, we were overlooked, brushed aside, and largely ignored by the more established and powerful civilizations of the galaxy. But that day changed everything. It began, as most great things do, with a mistake. The universe is vast, and most of the galaxy's powers had become accustomed to the natural order of things. They believed they knew how everything worked, how every species fit into the cosmic machine. The Aziri, the first to learn of humanity's existence in the stars, were among the oldest and most powerful of these civilizations. They had spent millennia expanding their reach, their power, and their knowledge. They were cold, calculating, and utterly unyielding. They believed themselves to be the masters of the galaxy, and all others were simply dust beneath their heels. But they had miscalculated. They failed to see what humanity had become, what we had forged ourselves into. At first, it was the ships. The Aziri scouts noticed strange disturbances in the fabric of space-time, small rifts that seemed to appear and disappear without warning. These disturbances were too precise, too controlled, to be mere cosmic anomalies. Yet they were also too subtle to warrant immediate alarm. Siri researchers dismissed the disturbances as a natural phenomenon, nothing to concern themselves with. After all, they were far above such things. But then, the unthinkable happened. A human ship appeared on the outskirts of their territory. It was nothing impressive by galactic standards, small, barely noticeable against the vast expanse of space. It didn't even possess advanced weaponry or superior shields. It was, by all outward appearances, primitive, a speck of dust in the great cosmic void. And yet, it wasn't the ship itself that caught the Aziri's attention. It was the signal it sent. It was a quiet transmission, a whisper sent across the void of space, one that demanded attention. For the first time in eons, the Aziri felt something they hadn't felt in millennia: uncertainty. They assumed it was a fluke, an oddity they could deal with. Their first move was calculated and cold. As always, send a diplomatic envoy. They would assess the situation, learn what they could from these strange newcomers, and then decide how to deal with them. If humanity was a mere curiosity, they would leave us to our insignificant existence. If we posed a threat, they would stamp us out as easily as they had done to countless other species. But when the Aziri envoy entered our solar system, they were met with something they hadn't anticipated. We did not greet them with fear or reverence. We didn't tremble before their ancient power or bow before their vast knowledge. Instead, we stood our ground. The message we sent was clear: without need for words, we are here, and we will not be ignored. There was no formal declaration of war, no grand speeches about taking the galaxy by force. But the Aziri sensed the shift. They felt the cold shiver of doubt creep into their minds as our ship's old, rusted and battered, flickered to life. They couldn't quite understand it. They tried to probe our communications, to decipher the intentions of these strange, upstart creatures, but there was nothing but confusion. We were unpredictable, a species driven by something far more potent than logic alone. It was in that moment that they realized they had underestimated us. And that was the first mistake of many. The Aziri, once the undisputed masters of the galaxy, had been thoroughly unsettled by the brief interaction with humanity. But they believed their superiority to be unquestionable, and after some initial confusion, they quickly regained their composure. They dismissed the human ships as insignificant, writing off our apparent defiance as nothing more than a minor irritation, a footnote in the grand history of their empire. However, they couldn't ignore what had transpired. The transmission we sent them was not just a call for diplomacy. It was a challenge, one they had not encountered in centuries. No other species had dared question their place in the galaxy. They had sent emissaries to countless lesser civilizations, expecting respect, subservience, and fear. And almost without exception, that was exactly what they received. So when their fleet arrived to meet humanity's ships, they came with an air of arrogance, certain that our fragile, underdeveloped species would buckle under the weight of their presence. They came not to negotiate, but to assert their dominance. The flagship of their fleet was a towering vessel, sleek and dark, a symbol of their technological supremacy. It was armed with weapons capable of incinerating entire planets, and it carried an elite team of Ziri diplomats, led by Admiral Vor, a being whose mind had been sharpened over millennia of warfare and politics. He had faced down empires far more powerful than ours, and he expected no resistance from the humans. His orders were simple: meet them, issue an ultimatum, and if they did not comply, destroy them. To the Aziri, it was a routine operation. Yet, when they made contact, the encounter was nothing like they anticipated. The first communication came not through words but through a signal, just as before, calm, deliberate, and full of purpose. Admiral Vor, confident in his superior intellect, opened the channel, expecting a humble message from humanity begging for their mercy. But instead of a supplicant tone, they were met with a calm, almost casual message that carried an undeniable weight. We are humans. You will listen to us now. At first, Vor was perplexed. No species, certainly not one as seemingly primitive as humanity, had ever spoken to him with such audacity. The Aziri diplomats demanded to speak, expecting to dictate the terms. The human ships did not even flinch. Then came the first demonstration of humanity's strength, a demonstration that no one could have predicted. From the smallest of our ships, an old cruiser that was little more than a relic of a bygone era, a pulse of energy shot forth. It was nothing the Aziri had encountered before. The pulse was not destructive, it did not annihilate, as they were accustomed to, but instead, it warped the very fabric of space itself, distorting the surrounding environment. The Aziri's advanced sensors could not fathom it. Their weapon systems flared in response, but nothing worked. Their calculations, which had always been flawless, began to falter. The pulse was subtle, and yet, it carried an unmistakable message: we are not here to submit. We are here to change the rules. The Ziri tried to retaliate, sending waves of focused energy toward the human ships. But their weapons had no effect. Their precision lasers failed to even scratch the surface of our ships. The Ziri, accustomed to overwhelming force, were caught off guard. They couldn't understand how these primitive beings had managed to do something that defied their understanding of physics. And then came the real shock: the humans didn't attack. They simply continued to resist, to exist, to challenge everything the Ziri knew about power. We had revealed a truth to them, one that would soon reverberate throughout the galaxy. Humanity had learned how to adapt in ways they could never have imagined. We weren't just another species to be crushed underfoot. We were something far more dangerous, a species that could evolve in real time, learning and changing faster than any of them could keep up with. And that realization was the first crack in the Ziri's unshakable confidence. They were no longer sure of their position in the galaxy, and for the first time in centuries, doubt began to creep into their minds. It was a simple message, but it shattered their perception of the universe: we are here, and we will never be what you expect. The Ziri, having barely recovered from their initial shock, found themselves faced with a decision that no other species had ever dared present them: negotiation or annihilation. The latter was their default response to any resistance, but something about humanity's unpredictability unsettled even their vast intellects. The mere thought of us had planted a seed of doubt in their minds, and they could not afford to let that grow. The Ziri had ruled the galaxy for eons, and they weren't about to let some primitive upstarts disrupt their reign. So, they made their choice: they would strike first. They summoned their warships, deploying a fleet large enough to obliterate 1,000 lesser civilizations. Each ship was equipped with weapons capable of reducing entire planets to ash. Their strategy was simple: intimidate us with sheer force and make an example of the humans before our resistance could truly coalesce. The message was clear: submit to our will, or face extinction. What they didn't know, what they failed to comprehend, was that humanity had already anticipated this move. Our scientists, engineers, and military leaders had been preparing for this moment, not in grandiose ways, but in quiet, calculated methods that only we understood. We had realized, long before the Aziri arrived, that we were not going to win a war with force alone. We were not built like the other empires. Our strength lay not in our weapons, but in our minds and our ability to adapt. And so, humanity's response was not to send out our own fleet of overwhelming power, but to wield something much more subtle. Information. We had spent decades studying the most advanced species in the galaxy, and what we had uncovered was something that none of them had ever expected. The Ziri, for all their might, had one weakness. It wasn't in their weaponry, nor in their ship's defenses. It was in their belief in their own superiority. We had infiltrated their communications, studied their patterns, and found a critical flaw in their technology. Their ships, despite their impressive capabilities, relied on a highly specialized quantum encryption system that was nearly impervious to conventional hacking methods. But humanity had discovered something that the Aziri never considered. Every system, no matter how advanced, had a back door, and we had found it. We didn't just attack their ships directly. We disabled their communications, silently creeping through their network with an almost eerie precision. One by one, the Aziri ships began to lose contact with their commanders. The entire fleet became disoriented, unable to coordinate. Their massive warships, which had once been a symbol of invincibility, were now isolated, vulnerable, and confused. The Aziri tried to reassert control, but it was too late. Our cybernetic warfare systems, though crude by the standards of the galaxy's greatest powers, were effective in a way the Aziri had never anticipated. And that was when we launched the next phase of our plan. With their fleets in disarray, humanity's counterattack began not with weapons of mass destruction, but with the manipulation of space-time itself. We had been working for years on a technology that had once been considered nothing more than a theoretical curiosity: quantum manipulation. It was not about brute force, it was about altering the fundamental rules of reality. The Aziri had relied on their understanding of physics to control everything around them, but humanity had turned that understanding on its head. We didn't need to destroy them. We didn't need to level their cities or burn their worlds. We simply changed the way their ships interacted with space. By subtly altering the gravitational fields around their vessels, we made their ships warp and buckle, twisting the fabric of reality itself. The once proud Ziri fleet found themselves caught in an inescapable loop, unable to escape the subtle manipulation of their own space-time. They were not defeated by our guns or our bombs, they were defeated by our ability to bend the very fabric of the universe to our will. And with that, the Aziri learned a lesson that no other species had ever taught them: their technology was not infallible, and their superiority was an illusion. The galaxy had never seen anything like humanity before. We were not just warriors, nor were we merely engineers. We were something far more dangerous: innovators. By the time the Aziri were able to regain some semblance of control, their fleets were scattered, and their empire was in disarray. It wasn't a crushing victory, LOPKSFH.TR, that sent them into retreat. It was the slow, methodical realization that they were no longer the apex predators of the galaxy. The humans had arrived, and we had rewritten the rules, and there was no going back. As the Aziri withdrew, their pride shattered and their empire in disarray, the galaxy's perception of humanity began to shift. News of our victory spread faster than any of us could have predicted. The once powerful empires of the galaxy, who had watched from the sidelines as the Aziri dominated and crushed lesser species, could no longer ignore us. The reactions varied, but one thing was certain: humanity had earned a place among the stars. The first response came in the form of whispers, hushed voices in dark corners of distant worlds. Some spoke of us with admiration, others with fear. The K'Tari, a race known for their stoic diplomacy, held quiet council meetings, weighing their options. The Wylan Empire, a powerful telepathic species, sent their emissaries with caution, unsure whether to engage or avoid us. But in every corner of the galaxy, one question was on everyone's lips: what were the humans truly capable of? Humanity did not waste time basking in the glow of our first victory. While the rest of the galaxy speculated, we were already moving forward, securing our place and preparing for the inevitable next phase. We had tasted victory, but we knew that we had only scratched the surface of what we could achieve. The galaxy was vast, and while we had made our mark, it was only the beginning. If the Exiri were afraid, we knew others would be too. Behind closed doors, humanity's leaders met to discuss the future. The most significant decision we made during those days was not about war or conquest. We had no interest in ruling the galaxy through fear alone. That was the mistake of so many before us. Instead, we chose to expand, to adapt, to learn from the failures of those who had come before us. Our technology was advancing at a rapid pace, but what was more important than the technology itself was the mindset that drove it. We understood that in order to secure our future, we needed to build relationships, even with those who viewed us with suspicion. This was a lesson learned from Earth's own history. True power did not come from crushing opposition, but from shaping the future through influence and cooperation. Still, our place in the galaxy was not yet secure, and we couldn't afford to wait for diplomacy to settle matters. The series' retreat was not a sign of their defeat. It was merely the beginning of a larger cosmic chess game, one that humanity had just entered. In the months that followed, we began sending delegations to other species, hoping to form alliances. Our first stop was the Ylan Empire, whose telepathic abilities could offer us valuable insights into the galaxy's more mystical elements. When they received our envoys, the Ylan were both fascinated and terrified. They tried to probe our minds, as they had done with countless other species, but found themselves locked out. We had developed a mental defense far beyond what they expected, a form of cognitive shielding that rendered their attempts ineffective. The Ylan leaders, in their towering citadels, were no longer sure what to make of us. They had relied on their psychic prowess for centuries, seeing it as the ultimate advantage in the galaxy. But the humans had found a way to shield ourselves from it. We had learned to defend ourselves in ways they had never imagined. We didn't need telepathy to communicate. Our minds were stronger, more adaptable than they could have anticipated. And we made it clear that we would not be pushed around or manipulated. Our successes were not immediate, and not everyone in the galaxy was eager to accept us as equals. We faced opposition from smaller factions, rebel groups who feared our rise, and older species who had lived for millennia in their own self-imposed superiority. But humanity had learned the value of perseverance. We did not give in to threats or intimidation. Our response was simple, and it was a message sent across the galaxy: adapt or perish. And adapt we did. We constructed massive fleets, not just to defend ourselves, but to carry the message of humanity's resilience. We established colonies on distant planets, terraforming environments and building cities where once there had been nothing. The galaxy began to notice. While other species argued over their territories, humanity was spreading, forging ahead into the unknown, leaving behind a trail of progress and invention. As our influence grew, so did the fear of those who had once thought of us as insignificant. The galaxy's more ancient powers were beginning to realize what they had overlooked: humanity was not merely a passing phase. We were here to stay. And soon the question would no longer be whether we could survive among the stars. The question would be whether the galaxy could survive us. The day the Exiri retreated from our presence, they had unknowingly set the stage for humanity's rise. From the ashes of their defeat, we had risen as something more dangerous than any of them had ever anticipated, a species that had learned from the mistakes of the past and was now poised to change the future of the galaxy forever. As the months passed and humanity's presence continued to spread across the galaxy, the realization began to settle in: we were no longer the underdog, the forgotten species that had barely earned a place in the stars. We had become a force in our own right. No one knew exactly what to make of us, but that uncertainty worked to our advantage. Where the older powers of the galaxy were confident in their position, humanity was a blank slate, a species capable of defying expectations, bending the rules, and constantly evolving. And it was that constant change, that unpredictable nature, that made us both terrifying and alluring. The Galactic Council, the body that oversaw diplomatic relations among the galaxy's most powerful factions, began to take notice. Initially, they treated us as a passing curiosity, a species that would either fall in line or fall apart in the face of more established empires. But as the months turned into years, the question no longer seemed to be whether humanity would collapse under pressure, it was whether they could stop us at all. Even the most conservative members of the Council, who had once dismissed us as little more than an irritant, were starting to realize that humanity's rise could not be ignored. The first sign that things were truly shifting came when representatives from the Tihar collective, a race of insectoid beings whose hive mind governed their every decision, requested an audience with human leadership. The Tihar, one of the oldest and most secretive species in the galaxy, had remained isolated from galactic politics for centuries, preferring to let other civilizations bicker and fight while they focused on their own internal growth. Yet here they were, asking to speak with us. The message they sent was vague but unmistakable: we need to understand you. For the Tihar, a race known for their exacting precision and communal intelligence, humanity's rapid rise was an anomaly they could not categorize. The collective had no concept of individualism. Their minds operated as a single unit, a seamless web of shared thoughts and experiences. The very idea of a species like humanity, driven by individual will, emotions, and the ability to evolve constantly, was a mystery to them. They needed to know how we had managed to accomplish so much in such a short time. Our leaders were cautious in their response. We had learned the hard way that not all factions sought peace, and the Tihar's request for understanding could easily be a ruse to study us for weaknesses. But humanity, for all its complexities, was also capable of collaboration when it was needed. Our negotiators, who had already proved themselves against the HFY, approached the Tihar with a mixture of curiosity and caution. The summit between the Tihar and humanity took place in a neutral zone, a vast station orbiting a gas giant, where both species could meet without the distractions of their home worlds. The Tihar's hive mind, a collective consciousness that spoke as one, was initially wary of humanity's singular thought processes. But as the talks unfolded, something unexpected happened. The Tihar found themselves intrigued. They had been accustomed to the cold, calculated logic of their hive, where every decision was made through consensus, where emotion and impulsive action were considered weaknesses. But humanity, with its chaos and unpredictability, had something that intrigued the Tihar. We had creativity. We had adaptability. And above all, we had the ability to overcome challenges that, to them, seemed insurmountable. It was a tentative alliance at first, but one that held immense potential. Humanity was not going to replace the Tihar's collective mind, nor were we going to become a part of their rigid structure. But we could complement each other. The Tihar, with their vast network of knowledge, would benefit from humanity's fresh perspective and willingness to take risks. In return, humanity would gain access to the collective wisdom and resources of the Tihar, strengthening our position in the galaxy. As the Tihar departed, a subtle shift took place. The other species in the galaxy, who had been watching with increasing interest, began to reassess their own positions. Some saw the alliance between the Tihar and humanity as a sign of things to come, a new era of cooperation between species. Others, less optimistic, saw it as a harbinger of what was to follow, a galaxy where humanity would not just be a player, but a force to be reckoned with. Even the Exiri, who had once been the undisputed rulers of the stars, began to stir. They watched the growing influence of humanity with a mix of disdain and wariness. Their defeat at our hands had left scars that would never heal, and though their empire had not crumbled, they had lost something more precious: their sense of absolute control. They had made the mistake of underestimating us once. And now, the possibility of a resurgence loomed. But humanity was not interested in simply taking power from others. We did not seek to replace the old guard. We were forging a new path, one that was neither dictated by the past nor defined by the conflicts of ancient empires. In the years to come, That path would take us beyond the stars, beyond the limitations of what had been, and into a future of limitless potential. We had become the most feared species in the galaxy not because we sought domination, but because we had become something no one could predict, a force of change that would leave an indelible mark on the universe. And there was no stopping us now. As humanity's influence spread across the galaxy, the balance of power continued to shift in ways that no one had foreseen. The old empires, once secure in their dominance, found themselves questioning their future in a universe where humanity was no longer just a nuisance, but a force of undeniable change. Our capacity for innovation, our resilience, and our ability to adapt had already rewritten the rules. And now, we were on the verge of something even greater. At the heart of this transformation was the growing network of alliances that humanity had begun to form. We were not content to simply conquer or assimilate. Our goal was to forge partnerships with species from every corner of the galaxy. Each new alliance brought with it valuable knowledge, resources, and, perhaps most importantly, a sense of solidarity. Humanity had learned the hard way that survival in this galaxy required more than just brute strength. It required collaboration, diplomacy, and the ability to understand and respect the strengths of others. The first major diplomatic breakthrough came when humanity brokered an agreement between two of the galaxy's most powerful factions, the Zakari Dominion and the Velashian Federation. These two empires had been locked in a centuries-long war, their battles decimating entire star systems and leaving countless worlds in ruins. For years, the galaxy had watched as the conflict raged, powerless to intervene as both sides were too entrenched in their hatred to consider peace. Humanity, however, saw things differently. Our diplomats approached the situation not as mediators, but as facilitators. Instead of focusing on the animosity between the two empires, we looked for common ground. We understood that both the Zakari and the Velashians had suffered from the war, and both were now facing external threats that could destroy them if they didn't unite. The talks were long and difficult, filled with tension and mistrust, but humanity's fresh perspective ultimately allowed us to broker a peace agreement that neither side had believed was possible. In the aftermath of the peace, the galaxy took notice. It was no longer just our military prowess that was being talked about, it was our ability to change the game. Humanity had done what no one thought could be done. We had brought two warring empires to the negotiating table, and in doing so, we had demonstrated a new way of thinking, one based not on dominance, but on cooperation and mutual benefit. However, the peace was fragile. There were factions within both the Zakari and Velashian empires that were unhappy with the agreement and sought to undermine it. Still, humanity remained steadfast in our commitment to diplomacy. We offered assistance in rebuilding the war-torn worlds, providing technology, resources, and expertise that allowed the former enemies to begin the slow process of healing. We didn't expect them to forget the past, but we encouraged them to build a future together, one where their strengths could complement each other instead of being used to destroy. While the peace between the Zakari and Velashians was a triumph, it was just one chapter in humanity's expanding role on the galactic stage. We knew that we could not rest on our laurels. The galaxy was still full of factions that viewed us with suspicion, and there were many who resented our rise. The Zirii, despite their retreat, were still a formidable presence, and other, more obscure species were watching us with a mixture of awe and fear. In the midst of this, humanity continued to push forward. We began exploring more distant regions of the galaxy, seeking out new allies, new knowledge, and new frontiers. Our ships, now equipped with technologies that defied the understanding of even the most advanced species, ventured into uncharted territories, discovering new worlds and resources that further strengthened our position. Yet we also began to encounter new threats, alien entities that were not interested in diplomacy or trade, but in something far darker. These beings existed on the fringes of known space, their motives hidden and their powers beyond anything we had faced before. They were not content with merely surviving. They sought to consume, to destroy, and to reshape the galaxy according to their own twisted vision. Humanity's response to these threats was immediate and resolute. We had learned to adapt and overcome. We were not a species to shrink from danger, but one that rose to meet it. As our military expanded, so too did our resolve. We began to form new coalitions with other species who had faced similar threats, pooling our knowledge and resources to prepare for the battles that were sure to come. And yet, even in the face of these new challenges, there was an undeniable truth: humanity had become a force to be reckoned with. Our rise had not been without its struggles, but each obstacle had only made us stronger, more determined, and more united. The galaxy, once a place where we were overlooked and underestimated, had now become a stage upon which humanity would make its mark, a stage where we would define the future, not through domination, but through innovation, diplomacy, and the unwavering belief that we could shape the galaxy into something better. And as humanity continued to rise, the stars themselves seemed to whisper a single truth: the day humans became the most feared species in the galaxy was not the end of their story. It was only the beginning. As humanity stood at the precipice of a new era, the galaxy around us was shifting in ways that none of us could have imagined. What had begun as a struggle for survival, a desperate defense against the Asiri and their overwhelming might, had evolved into something far greater. We were no longer just survivors or conquerors, we were becoming the architects of a new order, one that would reshape the very fabric of the galaxy itself. The alliances we had forged, the treaties we had brokered, and the peace we had brokered between warring factions were merely the first steps. Humanity's vision for the galaxy extended far beyond the confines of the stars we had claimed. We saw a future where the countless species of the galaxy would no longer be divided by ancient grudges, where the old ways of empire and conflict could be replaced by cooperation, mutual respect, and shared progress. But achieving such a vision was not easy. Though the peace between the Zakari and Voloshians had held, there were many who opposed the changes humanity sought to bring. Old guard factions, those who had ruled the galaxy with an iron grip for millennia, saw our rise as a threat to their established dominance. The Sirai, though they had retreated, had not forgotten the humiliation of their defeat. They remained a dangerous presence on the fringes of the galaxy, biding their time and waiting for an opportunity to strike back. But humanity had learned from every conflict, every lesson that history had to offer. We knew that we could not simply defeat these old powers through force alone. We had to outthink them, outmaneuver them, and outlast them. Our military continued to grow in strength, but so did our diplomatic efforts. We sent emissaries to distant worlds, not with demands, but with offers of partnership. We built relationships not through conquest, but through understanding. And as we traveled deeper into the unknown regions of the galaxy, we encountered new species, each with their own cultures, beliefs, and fears. Some welcomed us, eager for the knowledge and resources we brought. Others viewed us with suspicion, unwilling to accept a species so foreign to their way of life. But humanity had a way of winning hearts and minds, not through domination, but through shared experience and mutual benefit. One of the greatest challenges we faced, however, came from within. As we expanded, we began to realize that our rapid growth had its own set of dangers. The very qualities that had made humanity so successful, our creativity, our adaptability, our willingness to break with tradition, were also the qualities that could lead to internal strife. Not all factions within humanity agreed on the direction we should take. Some believed that we should adopt a more aggressive stance, that we should assert our dominance over the galaxy and bend other species to our will. Others, more cautious, worried that such actions would only lead to more conflict. There were debates within the halls of our government, in the councils of our most trusted leaders, and in the streets of our colonies. The question of what it meant to be human in this new galaxy was one that we had to answer together. It was no longer enough to simply survive or to fight back against those who threatened us. We had to decide who we were, what we stood for, and what legacy we would leave behind. It was a question that haunted us all, for we knew that the choices we made in these pivotal moments would determine the future of humanity and the galaxy itself. And then, as if to answer that question, the galaxy itself seemed to rise up in response. The ancient entities that had long watched over the galaxy, beings whose existence spanned eons, began to take notice of humanity's unprecedented rise. They were not gods, nor were they invincible. They were forces of nature, beings of incomprehensible power who had long seen themselves as the arbiters of fate, as the ones who shaped the course of galactic history. But even they could not ignore the impact that humanity was having. They watched as we reshaped the galaxy, and for the first time in their long existence they found themselves uncertain.